Method. I'm your host, Andrew Mintner, and on today's episode, we are going to dive into one of the premier matchups of the week, which will be Alabama versus Tennessee. Now, I apologize ahead of time. I am I'm behind with my episodes this week. I've had a lot of personal things I've been dealing with and stuff like that, and I haven't been able to get into as many as I wanted to, and that's totally fine. That's just how life is sometimes, and I'm okay with that. So on this episode, we are doing a little bit different as we get into the heart of conference play for a lot of these Power 5 teams. And so now what I want to take a look at is we have the early down data, which we've been tracking for weeks now. That has been extremely profitable for us. But one thing I want to do is I think it's key in these matchups to look at how the early down data is shown for Power 5 teams versus Power 5 teams. And you're going to see vast differences when it comes to how some of these teams have been performing versus better competition. So the reason is, I look at Alabama and their metrics are elite when it comes to certain areas, right? And this is something that really, doesn't meet the eye test over the last several games, leading up to the finishing second half of the Georgia game, then Vanderbilt, then South Carolina, and I'm like, man, these metrics I feel as if they're lying, right? I have to dig deeper to make sure that there's something that I'm not missing. Okay, so when we look at the early down data for Alabama's offense, you see they're still 11th overall, right? 0.0857 EPA per attempt. Now, this is 11th out of 69 Power 5 teams. So you need to understand that when we're looking at this. This isn't 11 out of 134 teams. This is 11th out of 69 Power 5 teams. Now, this data is strictly Power 5 versus Power 5. So that kind of gives you the best of the best defenses, right? And that's kind of what we want to take a look at here. Now, if you look at Alabama overall and just their every game included, including games not against the Power 5 that are not Division II games, they're averaging 11.9 EPA per attempt, right, on early down. So that's comparable to an extent there, and that's kind of what we're wanting to gauge here as we look further down. All right, now when we go to the EPA on defense, they're negative 1.27 or negative 0.127, excuse me. And then when you go to the defensive tab, they're a little bit better, obviously, on the opposite end of that. Now, the thing that is really eye-opening, so when we look at Tennessee here, they're number one overall versus Power 5 defenses. And that right there tells me that they are playing better defensively against better units. And I think if you've watched any of the Tennessee games to see what is the problem, what is happening, it's surely not the defense. That unit is locked in, and I think anybody with a pulse and two eyeballs understands that from watching them. Even when they lost to Arkansas, that wasn't because of the defense. It was because of the offense. Now, when we look at the offense, they're ranking 41st overall with EPA per attempt, and remember, out of 69 teams. So that is negative 0.079, and when we look at the Tennessee side of it, that's a little bit of a difference than what we're looking at regularly. 0.0284 to the positive, that's a difference. That's a viable difference, right? So this is where all the stories are told, though. As we go to the depth for each team, this is something that is extremely telling to me. So we're looking at what we call the Mickey Mouse Big Dog chart, and this is essentially, Mickey Mouse throws are 9 yards or less or behind the line of scrimmage, and then Big Dog is 10 yards or more down the field, right? So when we look at Alabama here, On offense, 0.134 per attempt. And then when you look at that switched over to them facing Power 5 defenses, it is vastly different. 0.045 negative, mind you. 51st overall out of only 69 teams, mind you. Okay, so that's something that's eye-opening there. One thing that is constant, though, is they are very explosive down the field, and that does not change regardless of which defense they play. So 0.9921 EPA per attempt, which is astronomically high. And then when you put them up against the best defenses, they're the best. First overall, 0.975 per big dog attempt. So what does that tell me? That tells me that they are still very good down the field, and they're just exceptional in that range. And it doesn't matter who they play, they are just very good in that range. But when it comes to these short, intermediate routes, they are not nearly as good. And that's telling because that's where you kind of have to be really good at when you're facing harder teams, because you're not just going to be able to bomb it down the field 25 yards whenever you want. You have to set those plays up against better defenses by being able to matriculate the ball down the field. Now, when we look at it from Tennessee's side of the ball, their struggle has obviously been their offense. Now, but it's even more of a struggle than you would think. Okay, so overall, 0.120 on passes 9 yards or less, and then when you go to Power 5, they're pretty much on par with that, which is I don't want to say shocking, but I did not anticipate that. But the thing is, they're known for their big plays, their throws down the field, and that's where you see a large difference, okay? So when we're looking at Tennessee down the field, they're going to be 0.408. So overall, and that's pretty solid because they're actually really good in the 0.257. I was looking at Temple, my bad. They're actually pretty decent deep down the field, not great in the intermediate and the medium range. But so 0.257, that puts them at about average overall. But when we look at the Power 5 side of it, they're one of the worst. So they're negative 0.04. That's 5 times as bad down the field than what their season average is. And I think anybody who has watched any of the previous 3 games, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and who's the other one? I got a brain lapse coming through here. Florida, you can see the struggles in that, right? And so that is something that is very concerning to me, but I'm going to show you why I feel as if they have the potential to come out of that. Now, when we go to the defensive side of the ball, Alabama on routes 9 yards or less, 46th overall, negative 0.026, very respectable, right? And then down the field, extremely respectable, elite level, in the secondary. And the main reason behind that, these numbers, they're propped up from a lot of the group of 5 games, but they have been decent in certain games. Like they were really good in the first half against Georgia, very bad in the second half against Georgia. So you kind of have to understand that as you're looking at it from a whole, right? But that immediately changes when we take a look over here at the Power 5 depth chart. So on 9 yards or less against Power 5 teams, they're 61st overall out of 69 teams. And this is not shocking if you have watched the last 3 games, especially the second half of the last 2.5 games, essentially. All right. And so negative 0.026 here, positive 2.14 here. That is, that's almost 10x, 10 times as bad, basically. And then it's even more eye-opening when we go to down the field throws, right? .3137 down the field. And now that doesn't seem like a big deal, but that's 30 times as much, like, as bad, as inefficient, right? And so the thing here is, this tells me two things, okay? Alabama is struggling in the secondary, whereas like Tennessee is trying to get better at it, right? The offense is struggling in the intermediate, and they're excelling in 20 yards down the field, just because they have the talent to basically beat out anybody in that area, right? But it becomes infinitely harder when you cannot set the defense up for that. A la, they jump out to the 14-0 lead over South Carolina, and then it's a dogfight the rest of the way, right? Same thing with Vanderbilt. They could never get ahead of that because of their defense. Now, one thing that really stands out about Tennessee to me is they arguably have a top 5 defense in the entire country, okay? So when you're looking at them overall on, they are elite. We're looking at them here in 9 yards or less, negative .140. And then when they're facing better competition, it's right on the same cusp, .136, negative .136. And then when we go to their big dog, they're 25th and passes 10 yards or more down the field out of 134 teams. And then when we go to the Power 5 side of it, they're even better against Power 5 teams down the field. And so, got a lot going on here. They're right on. They're better, a little bit worse, but they're in the same range, right? There's not any drastic defensive differences here, and so what that tells me is the unit is holding ground regardless of who they're playing, and I think anybody who has watched their last several games can attest to that. I mean, they're doing extremely well in the secondary when it comes to these type of things, right? So let's look at the advanced statistics side of the ball. Now, remember, when we're looking at these advanced stats, I can only filter out garbage time. So this is every single game filtered in. So we have to remember that while we're looking at this, okay? So Alabama, extremely explosive, but they are lacking on the offensive line. And I think that's kind of obvious if you've seen what they do. Tennessee pretty much, they're elite in the trenches. I don't think they're the best havoc team in the country. That's led by their front seven. And then they're just insanely good against the rush. I mean, 4th overall in efficiency, 77th in explosiveness, and then 6th in limiting passing. This defense checks all the boxes, and that is the unit that is driving this team. So when we go to the offensive side of the ball, the defense for Alabama, which was the question mark coming into the season, is still a question mark. I think we can honestly say that, right? So you look at, they're producing some havoc in the secondary, but there's nothing here that is just telling me they're going to be able to, match up and, stop Tennessee or falter them, right? Tennessee has looked like a shell of itself and not anything even closely reminiscent of any Josh Heupel offense. But, I mean, they have a perfect matchup here to fix that. Now, I started doing high leverage sheets here, which is 3rd and 4th down, just so we can kind of try to understand if there's anything we're missing, right, from the early downs. Now, overall, Alabama, 36th in offense on 3rd and 4th down, EPA per attempt, and their defense is 33rd overall. This is overall in the grand scheme of things, right? Tennessee, on the other hand, 4th overall on defense and below average on offense, to say the least. Okay? But let's look how this lines up when we're playing harder offenses, okay? Or harder defenses, So Alabama plays, as .091. They're 25th out of 69 Power 5 teams, and that's semi on par with their overall. ranking, which is okay. It's in the range, right? But when we go to defense, the change is immeasurable. They're .321 EPA per attempt on third and fourth down for defense, and that's going to be, again, like 34 times less efficient versus offenses from the Power 5. And this is just something that just really, sticks out to me when I'm looking at these teams. Tennessee on one hand, their defense is going to carry. Like, they are great against any team on third and fourth down. Now, their offense, on the other hand, really fucking bad. 64th overall on third and fourth down Power 5 EPA. But this is the thing, okay? So I have to sit here and see, what is true here, because we have two programs here with a litany of question marks, in my opinion, okay? So Tennessee is struggling mightily down the field, and Alabama is struggling against any offense with a pulse. And so my thought process here is simple, okay? Who has looked less shaky in the last couple of weeks, right? Alabama, in my opinion, has arguably could have lost the last 3 games. The Georgia game now, I'm not going to dive into that too deep. They only trailed for 13 seconds in that game, so I'm not going to sit here and be like they should have lost that. But it could have happened. Like they were not, down the stretch, it was waning. They did lose the Vanderbilt game, which they never led in. And then realistically, they should have lost the South Carolina game. They played extremely, extremely conservative, and they played not to lose, which almost happened. Now, I have to see whether or not they're going to be able to go into Tennessee and produce any type of game that is possible of winning here. And Tennessee is not Wisconsin. Like, I think Wisconsin, Camp Randall, a very hard place to play, but nobody was expecting Wisconsin to give them a run for their money. Tennessee, people are expecting Tennessee to win this game. They're only 3.5-point underdogs. And so for me, I think like Alabama really is they're struggling here. And this is going to be a part where they're going to have a lot of question marks. And if the defense cannot hold up and Tennessee's offense gets any type of traction with this high pace, run first, deep play shots, down the field, if they catch any traction, this defense is legitimately good. And that's been proven across the board. So I personally am going to be leaning with Tennessee here. I think before I dove into the game, I really felt like Alabama had the spot here because Tennessee's offense looked just abysmal. But, I mean, both of these teams have enormous question marks. And for me, I'm going to lean with the team that has the best unit in this game is the Tennessee defense. And the weakest unit in this game is the Alabama defense. So I personally am just going to lean with Tennessee here and feel like they're going to have the juice at home, and this is a potential get-right spot for that offense that has the overall ability to be great. So that's going to be it for today's video. Again, please like, subscribe, share, comment on the video if you have any suggestions. I have a couple suggestions I will be getting to. They're mainly the academy teams that everybody loves now because they're doing incredible and just really getting after it. So I'm going to do a couple of those quick videos, and then I'm probably going to break down the Georgia-Texas game, as that is a huge game also. And, that's going to be pretty much it. So thanks again for watching. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.